Going live. Good evening, YouTube. This is Bishop A. Wayne Jones. And this evening, we're coming to you with a topic, with an examination called The Dual Nature of Truth. Now, the focus this evening is to take a look at what, in fact, truth is, the objective of truth, as well as looking at truth's complements and its counterparts. Everything in God's creation, as well as in the universe and the cosmos, has both complements and counterparts. Now, by complements, what we mean is that there are ideas, expressions, and manifestations which are supportive of that particular concept of thing, in this case, truth, however, on a different level and in supporting disciplines and supporting manifestation. But there are also counterparts, things that are contrasting, opposing, and in fact, which represent a principle that is exclusive. For example, where we are looking at truth, the counterpart of truth is in fact falsehood. Falsehood and truth cannot coexist. They are mutually exclusive. So where the principle is concerned, you cannot have both truth and falsehood operating within the same system or within the same set of principles. Now, this evening, as we take a look at this, it's important to know, because today, as we move closer to the end of this age, as we come to the fulfillment of the last things in the economy of humanity and man's reign and control of the planet, we're seeing many things come together in a convergence, a collage, if you will. And it is becoming increasingly more difficult to distinguish between what is truth and what is falsehood. So this evening, as we discuss this, what I want to impose, or rather impress upon you, is that one, truth is recognizable. Truth is not elusive. It is not a principle or reality or concept that escapes us. However, there are principles that we must understand to make the distinction between truth and falsehood. Let us take a look at four broad areas we're going to examine. Truth, where we have truth meaning the way it is, the reality, and of whichever discipline, whichever manifestation in life that truth may be expressed, it is always coherent. It is coherent, it is synchronous, meaning that it does not contradict itself. Truth is non-contradictory. So wherever truth occurs in any discipline, it does not contradict the principle of truth operating in a distinct or an alternate discipline. So when we speak about truth, the thing to understand is that there are two manifestations or two qualities of truth. There is redemptive truth, and then there is reflective truth. Both expressions of truth, mind you. However, redemptive truth is the highest expression of truth, again, meaning the way it is. Coming from the Greek word aletheia, meaning the way it is, the reality, and talking about truth, meaning the ground of all that is, that which informs, that which brings into being and holds together that which is. When we look into the area of the material world, or the world that we may directly perceive, whether it is through our natural perceptual faculties or through technology or other machinery and instrumentation, what we see through those media is what is called reflective truth. Now, reflective truth is that which may be measured, that which may be perceived, that which may be apprehended, that which may be discovered within the realm of human experience, whether it be physical, whether it be intellectual, whether it be metaphysical, whether it be emotional. Reflective truth points to redemptive truth. Redemptive truth is that area, that expression of truth, which reveals to us the Creator, the Supreme Being, the Creator of all things. Redemptive truth, in fact, reveals and makes known to us the person, the intelligence behind all that we may experience and observe in our empirical life and experiences. So the complement of redemptive truth is reflective truth. Now, redemptive truth primarily has three major objectives, or should I say effects, as it interacts with man or with creation, with creatures, with ourselves. Redemptive truth, first of all, is an operation of revelation. It is an operation of revelation which is manifested, which proceeds out of the Creator, the Supreme Being, God. And through self-revelation, we come to know those truths, those principles, those realities, which will bring us into a personal, intimate relationship with the Creator. And so through revelation, and it is revelation because it is nothing that we can deduce. It is nothing that we can induct. We cannot figure it out. We could not come to that conclusion by the power of intellect. It is revealed and made known to us because the Creator, God, is beyond the orb and the field of our perception. And this, of course, is why the scripture says that he is invisible. Not necessarily invisible, meaning unable to be seen or beheld, but invisible, because in which he immediately indwells is beyond the orb and the reach and the terminus of all of our faculties of perception. Now, we know that on a comparative basis because let's just take the perception of sight. Human faculty of sight or vision, it really operates within a very, very, very fine sliver of all that may be seen. And what we call the field of vision, bounded by the infrared and the ultraviolet, has a median frequency of something like 570 trillion cycles per second. And outside of that narrow band of frequency, everything else is invisible. That is, it is beyond the field of our perception. And so God, who is creator, who is above all, beyond all, he, of course, is beyond our immediate field of perception, whether it be hearing, whether it be sight, whether it be thought and apperception. So in order for us to become aware of who he is, that must come through self-disclosure from God. And that is what is called revelation. And now the purpose of that revelation and why it is called redemptive truth is one, because that self-revelation of himself, his mind, his will, his purpose, his plan for what he has created and for what in us, the first purpose of that self-revelation is what we might call translation, to translate us from a purely human temporal plane into an eternal relationship with him, wherein our nature and our connection with him has been so transformed that our nature is transformed to be that of his nature. And of course, when we read the scripture, we're talking about being born again, being born unto life, being brought into his presence, his being, having received the divine nature, becoming a new creature that is translated. And that translation initially takes place in the spirit. And we find by revelation that man is composed of spirit, soul, and body. The spirit, of course, is that faculty, the real person. It is the life, the distinctive, unique being that is us. And through and with our spirit, we come into the knowledge of God. We are aware of God. We sense him. And through revelation, self-revelation of himself, his will, his purpose, and his reaching out to us redemptively, we, of course, then become born again, literally born from above. and our spirit is translated from a purely human quality into the divine, hence being partakers of the divine nature. Peter tells us this in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. And Paul also says this to us in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and 17. So the objective of redemptive truth, which comes through revelation, first of all, is translation, to translate us, humankind, men and women, into his divine nature. This comes through belief in the Lord Jesus Christ, who became man, shared human nature, who died and rose again, and created a new order, a new species of being that brings us into relationship with the Creator. The second aspect of revealed truth or redemptive truth, after having brought us into relationship, after having translated us, then the second aspect of that is to bring us into fellowship with him. Now, what do we mean by fellowship? By fellowship, what is meant and what is intended, that now having received his divine nature on the inside, whereas the frequency of our being has been transformed, then this revealed truth, this redemptive truth, brings us into fellowship and consonance with God, meaning that we become what he is, how he is, living in these bodies of flesh and blood. Now, that takes a little while because that is an experiential, if you will, empirical transformation over time. But the idea of us being in consonance with God, with the Creator, this truth, and I'll put it this way, this truth brings about in us the same kind of mind, the same quality of character as the Father in heaven. The fallen nature, the sin nature of Adam, the inherent destructive impulse of humanity are over time melted away and replaced by the qualities and faculties of the divine nature, which in its highest expression is love. Now, we may do some loving things, but there's a distinct difference in being consonant with the love of God, and it takes place over time. That is the second focus, aspect, purpose, objective of this revealed redemptive. And as we grow and proceed in this fellowship and consonance with God, and by the way, that word consonance has the idea of being the same as. In physics, there is a principle known as sympathetic vibration. And it is one of the properties of vibration and sound And in the principle of sympathetic vibration, when a tuning fork of a certain frequency is struck, and there is another tuning fork on the other side of the room, once the tuning fork begins to vibrate, once it is struck, the tuning fork on the other side of the room will begin to vibrate at the same frequency, though they're separated by space. Well, the sound waves, the vibrating sound waves, which in fact are vibrating molecules, vibrating atoms at a certain frequency, will make contact with the tuning fork that has not been struck, and they will resonate or vibrate in consonance, that is, at the exact same frequency. So divine truth, revealed truth, redemptive truth is designed to bring our lives to a point where we are thinking, living, functioning, vibrating, if you will, on the very frequency of God. And again, that takes time, but over time, as the scripture says, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That is what redemptive truth, revealed truth, is designed to do. In the book of Job, Elihu says that there is a spirit in man, and the Almighty by inspiration giveth him understanding. And again, this is the inspiration, this is the revealed Spirit of God working in man, in the believer, one who receives. You see, once the truth is given, it must be received in order to have its effect. And of course, this is what the scripture means by believe. To believe is to receive the truth that has been revealed and the truth that has been given. So, redeemed truth, which comes by revelation from the Creator, its first objective is to reveal the Creator himself, make him known unto us, and through that, to bring us into relationship with him. Bringing us into relationship with him is actually a change, a transformation of basic and intrinsic nature. And being brought into fellowship with him, the change in our basic and intrinsic nature is that we move from death to life. We move from a fallen nature in the spirit, which is disconnected, separated from God, to one of relationship wherein we are born again and become his children, children in nature, not children in creation. There's a distinction. And we are made partakers of the divine nature. Now, there are many ways of describing that experience. Some have called it, and these are all biblical descriptions. Some are converted, some are born again, some receive Christ, some are born from above. But again, many synonyms to describe the same event as a result of having received redemptive truth. So, translation brings us into relationship with him. And then over time, as his redemptive truth, the revelation, operates in us and becomes the means by which we think and live our lives, then we come into fellowship with him. And the goal is that we become consonant with him. Over time, we are at different places along that line. But the goal is to become completely consonant with the Father, consonant with Christ, consonant with the Spirit, so that were anyone to ask us concerning a life issue, when we are in consonance with him, our response will be exactly that as he would give. And then finally, redemptive truth working in us brings about ecstasy. And this ecstasy comes about as we understand the stewardship that we have been imputed, we have been granted from the Father. You see, the stewardship has to do with managing portions and aspects of the estate of God, the revealed estate. What does that mean? That means once having come into relationship with him, then having entered into fellowship with him, our life becomes a lifelong mission in which we are actually administering and managing an area, resources of and within the estate of the Creator, and fulfillment and pursuit of that stewardship is the source of true ecstasy. That is where the joy of life springs from. So that is redemptive truth. Now, redemptive truth is recorded in all things that God created. I should say it is recorded from writings of men and women that God worked through and revealed himself to. They wrote chronicles and records and left a testimony for future generations. And coming to those writings, the Bible, the Hebrew and Greek texts, he has recorded those texts, I should say, record redemptive truth as well as historical and others. But the focus of them is to leave a record of the progressive revelation of this redemptive truth. Now, redemptive truth does not stand alone, because redemptive truth's twin brother, if you will, is reflective truth. Whereas redemptive truth, which comes by revelation, it is revealed to the spirit of man and woman, because it is not of this world. It is not a work of man. It is not a work of a creature, but it is the direct line of self-revelation of the Creator himself. Although we have received that and have record of it, it does not stand alone, because redemptive truth is mirrored in its complement, complement, the complement of reflective truth. Reflective truth, unlike redemptive truth, it is the expression of truth through the intellect, through the human mind. And when we are educated in the various schools and institutions and universities, we're engaging ourselves in reflective truth. The objective of reflective truth, first of all, is to learn through first observing our environment, our world, and through observing it, come to the sense of synchronism of the laws, the forces, the events, and other principles that make up this world. And so learning by observation, the mind, the intellect, and over time, as we study and as we watch and observe, we begin to note the synchronism of those things that we observe. We note the synchronism of the seasons. We note the synchronisms of the stars and the astronomical bodies, the celestial bodies. We note the synchronism of nature, the ecology of nature, the cycle of seasons, the cycles of life through the phases of life, the cycle of life, birth, growth, aging, death, the building and the constructing of civilizations and society. There is an underlying principle there which is identified both from deductive thought as well as inductive thought and dialectic thought. And as we begin to see that the heavenly bodies move in a regular cycle, a repeating cycle, and the cycles are undiminished. Now, what we call the disciplines of knowledge are really the distinct expressions of reflective truth. In ancient times in the Nile Valley, as our ancestors beheld the rising, the annual sidereal rising of Sirius, which oriented in the eastern skies in pre-dawn, in the heliacal rising of Sirius, just as dawn was cresting on the horizon, and immediately before the sun rose, Sirius would orient above the horizon. This event occurred regularly every 365.2422 days. And that heliacal rising of Sirius marked the beginning of the new year and the flooding of the Nile. And it was that star which principally is the generator of the calendar. And so with these cycles, as they were noted, we learn reflectively that we live in an orderly universe. And as we look at the details of these principles across all of the disciplines, we see a repeating and an ambient principle in all of them, whether geometrically, whether cyclically. There are certain numbers, there are certain reoccurrences that occur over and over and over and over and over. And this is the synchronism. And reflective truth points to the creator behind redemptive truth. And I'll use two examples to illustrate this. And interestingly enough, there are two absolute chronologies by which we might measure time and events on the planet. One is the celestial chronology, or the astronomical chronology. The stars in their cycles have not changed. In stars and the constellations, their movements and their relationships to one another could not be coincidental, because the names of the stars, the names of the constellations, their positions also tell a story. And as we look at those constellations and stars that orient regularly, by which we may know where we are in the volume of space and what proximity we are within to other celestial bodies, and what that means in terms of climate, weather. Let me make a note here. There is much discussion today about global warming and about climate change. Well, climate change, in actuality, is only one of the aspects of this cycle of change in our cosmos and in the earth. There is a long year, or great year, called the Procession of Equinoxes. And the Procession of Equinoxes is a period of time, a cycle measured by 25,920 years. This is the period of time that is required for the entire constellation, the zodiac of the 12 principal constellations, to make one revolution about the axis of the Earth in the elliptical plane. And meaning, over the period of 25,920 years, the night sky, the constellations of the night sky, they revolve counterclockwise across the prime meridian, the vernal equinox, and the night sky changes. And in the period of those changes, the impact and the influence upon the earth is such that the earth goes through periods of warming and cooling. Now, for those civilizations and those societies that have not noticed or recorded or aware or have included that phenomenon into their lexicon of metrology and climate and ecology, to be a thing that is taking place without cause or effect. But what we're seeing today is simply, you might say, the expression of the cosmic season, of the cosmic year, or the great year. Just as we notice the seasons annually, spring, summer, fall, and winter. Well, there are larger seasons, cosmic seasons, that are generated by the precession of equinoxes every 25,920 years. So as men with their intellect, through powers of the mind, have observed these laws, these principles, and these changes, they have identified synchronisms, and they were recorded. They were recorded and confirmed and reaffirmed. And so the celestial clock is an absolute chronology. The stars don't change, they don't move out of place. And so we may measure the passage of time and the chronology of history, as well as the story of civilization, through the celestial clock. But there is another absolute chronology. And that absolute chronology is, interestingly enough, it is the polymorphic character of the genetic structure. And so by examining the genetic structure of modern humans and reading and recording the polymorphisms, that is, the genetic changes and the chromosomal changes, the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome of men, then those markers, those genetic chronometers, give us the history and the placement and the travel and the movement of civilization from the first to the present man. And as men, through their intellect, studied and observed through reflective truth, they began to see patterns that pointed to one beyond the boundary of the cosmos and the universe. Looking at the discipline of mathematics, looking at various mathematical constants, transcendental numbers that occur and reoccur in nature, pi, phi, e, observing these constants in nature and the character of these numbers, it makes it very clear that there's something beyond the boundary of what we call the finite. That which is not contrived, it was not invented, but rather discovered. It had been lying there all the time, and it points to one who not only made the stars and the planets and the galaxies, one that not only made man, but who is beyond them both. And he has communicated with us through the code of the world in which we inhabit. Even the spacing and the placement of the planets in this solar system, they are arranged on a mathematical knowledge by one who is very well acquainted with super science and super forces, and arrange them and design them with such delicacy that certainly it could not have been an accident. Not only that, but in studying our universe, our cosmos, coming to recognize that there are 63 scales of the observable universe, from the quantum level at 10 to the minus 35th power centimeters, to the boundary of the universe itself at 10 to the 27th power centimeters. And each scale is 10 times larger than its preceding scale. And right in the middle at the axis of these 63 scales is human life, man himself. No coincidence, but design. And so as we begin to study reflective truth, we begin to see that there's something beyond reflective truth, because reflective truth, as in the name, is a reflection of something greater. And it points to the Creator. And so then, redemptive truth is not without a witness. Its witness is in reflective truth. Another way of describing reflective truth is evidentiary truth. Let the evidence speak for itself. You don't have to interpret it, but let it speak for itself. What is it saying? And as we look at reflective truth in every discipline, it becomes very clear that none of these things sprang out of nothingness, because the degree of complexity, it is astounding and dumbfounding. So the objective of reflective truth, in complement to redemptive truth, is to give us knowledge, whereas the objective of redemptive truth is to give us life, life from the source, eternal life, life unending. From the first law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation, that energy is not destroyed. There is no new energy created, nor is energy destroyed, but it only transmutes. So there is a principle that we've learned from reflective truth, that energy, life, and being is not destroyed, but only transmuted or translated. And it points to something greater. You see, unlike reflective truth, which cannot give us the why of all of this, reflective truth can only tell us the what, the where, the when, and in some instances, the how. Reflective truth is that which can only be weighed, counted, and measured. But reflective truth does not answer the question of why all of this and what is the purpose. That is reserved for redemptive truth. So redemptive truth has the complement of reflective truth. And while others may use other labels, the principles are the same. When we say redemptive truth, we're talking about biblical truth. When we're talking about reflective truth, we're talking about classical, general, physical principles. We're talking about the principles of the disciplines. And we're talking about science. You see, reflective truth's objective is knowledge. And that is exactly what the word science means, knowledge. So reflective truth takes a look at evidentiary, at the evidence of our environment. And through observation and through synchronism, it creates an awe of what is there. And when questions are asked, how could such a thing be? From where could such a thing spring from? Reflective truth points to redemptive truth and says, there lies the answer. Now, as I said earlier, where truth has a complement, it also has a counterpart. That is a principle that operates in opposition. Now, the principle that operates in opposition to reflective truth is what we call presumption. Presumption, it also springs from the mind, but not the intellect. It springs rather from attachment and affection. Presumptive truth has basically as its mode of operation subjectivity. And through this subjectivity, it operates to reach an expediency to accomplish its attachment, or to hold on, or to, if you will, accomplish or gain that attachment, which results in a skepticism. Because you see, presumption, or it cannot and does not let the evidence speak for itself, but it presumes something, not a principle, but it presumes something that will support its attachment and which is expedient for accomplishing that attachment, and holds out a skepticism for all else that does not support or agree with it. And we understand there are individuals that operate in this way, professionals and others. They may argue artfully that their presumption is correct, but it is only opinion. It is supported by nothing. It is artfully presented as certainly this is the way things must be. And presumption is in direct opposition to both reflective truth and redemptive truth. Evolution is a work of presumptive truth. It is presumed. There is no evidence to support it, because once the evidence is evaluated and assayed, as a geologist would assay a rock to determine its mineral composition and its specific gravity, it doesn't hold up. And it's interesting that one of the disciplines that evolutionists are very, very, very wary of, and they keep a wide berth of this discipline, And it's found in reflective truth, and that's mathematics. Mathematically, evolution cannot, does not hold up or stand up. Because if this world that we're living in is, in fact, the product of chance, then one mathematical principle, or I should say property, of combination and permutations, looking at the structure of life itself, sends that presumption flying out of the window. Because were this a chance generated universe, there simply has not been enough time. You know what is quite interesting? The human cell, the single cell, the evolutionists will tell us that at some point, nothingness somehow auto-generated and produced life, which at some point cell organism. But the design of the single cell organism, and in terms of the nucleotides, the molecular chains necessary to bring the nucleus of a cell into being, it is so complex, so astronomically large, that if we're looking at statistical probability, which is what is defined as chance, because there is no such thing as chance, there is no such thing as luck. We live in a cause and effect universe. But going with their argument, fine, let us examine that mathematically. It would require, using their model, their rubric of chance, and their primary premise is altogether flawed, because something does not come from nothing, but just say it happened to do that. And this was all a matter of chance. The time required just for a single cell organism to come into being, no, not the single cell, but the nucleus. For you have the cell, you have the cytoplasm and the organelles, and then the cell membrane. According to chance, as they put it, it would have required more than 100 billion years, just by chance, for the nucleus of an atom to come into being by chance. And there are many more complications with that. So we know that it didn't happen by chance, because the single cell organism, well, I'll put it this way. The typical adult human being is made up of 37.2 trillion cells. So if it required more than 100 billion years for just the nucleus of a single cell to combine by chance, and we're not even examining what has to go to take place, then we're talking about 100 billion times 37.2 trillion before the first man or first human could spring into being. That's a stretch. That's a stretch. Yes, that's 100 billion That's followed by 9 zeros, and 37.2 followed by 12. And the universe is arguably less than 15 billion years old. The universe is not old enough for such a chance variation to take place. And I know of no mathematical equation, no mathematical rubric, or even theory that even begins to approach justifying that nonsense. So, again, we're talking about presumption. And many of the things in our modern age that we've come to accept as being, how should I say, um, the result of good science really turns out to be presumption. And that's one of the reasons why I'm presenting that this evening, because as people of God, we must know how to think, but more importantly, we must know what there is to think about. And finally, going beyond redemptive truth, going beyond reflective truth, going beyond presumption, which basically is opinion, then there is perversion. Perversion is the principle of iniquity, which opposes and rebels against all that is of God and all that is a witness to redemptive truth and himself. Now, perversion operates or functions by iniquity, which is lawlessness. Its focus, one, is to bring about the suppression of truth. The ancient Egyptians, ancient Kemetu, had a principle for perversion. It is called isfet, and it means to do evil, that which is in opposition to good, what is righteous, what is holy, what is in harmony, what is in balance. It has the idea of not only to do that which is evil, but to bring about chaos and disorder within the individual that practices it and within society. So perversion is isfet, suppression of truth. And then secondly, indulgence in the base and wicked impulse within fallen human nature. Now, don't we see that today? We see vice having been made to be virtue. That's perversion or isfet. Now, but as long as somebody can benefit or the illusion can be given that somebody is benefiting, then isfet has passed into state and federal legislation, as well as municipal ordinances. We see it all the time. But we must know the difference. Know the difference. And not only suppression of truth, not only indulgence of the fallen base impulses, but also willfulness. Willfulness meaning that being outside the obligation of accountability of any principle or law or godliness. That's where our society has fallen to today. That's where the world has fallen to today. And we who are the sons and daughters of God and who are followers of Jesus Christ, that is what we come up against every day. However, as we understand what we're dealing with, we know how to combat it, to overcome it. So, what is it that perversion promotes in its final recourse? It is reprobation. Reprobation meaning a state where one has gone beyond the ability to distinguish or to even perceive what is right. So these four pictures we've looked at, as we've looked at the dual nature of truth, truth being redemptive truth, and then reflective truth being its complement, but then its counterparts being presumptive truth and pervasive truth. So the question we must ask ourselves today as people of God, how do we ensure that we identify what is truth, what is presumption, and what is perversion? And I want to invite you to hit the thumbs up button. That'll help us tremendously. And also subscribe to our channel. We will be having more of these discussions as we go forward. These are issues that we as the people of God today must really be aware of and conversant in so that we may be effective in reaching this generation and evangelizing this generation, evangelizing the world in this generation. And Jesus said it, he said it best. If you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Do subscribe to our channel, hit the thumbs up button, and we will be coming back again with another discussion, another examination of these principles that we are tasked with today, so that we'll understand very clearly how to walk in redemptive truth, but as well how to combat that which is in opposition to it. May the Lord bless you on this evening. That which is in opposition to it. May the Lord bless you on this evening.